Welcome to the second day of Rendez-vous Paris Mat 2024. I will ask to have the doors closed, please. And congratulations for being here this morning. And we've delayed the opening by 1 hour. And I was told that you enjoyed the evening yesterday until a late hour and in a beautiful light. And today we're going to start by discussing space surveillance with General Michel FRIEDLING, co-founder and CEO of Lookup Space. And you are a former Space Force general. Sounds like Star Wars. And you published a book recently on the new challenges for this new era of space exploration. And there are many questions that we need to ask ourselves in terms of sovereignty. So, General, could you explain why space surveillance is now a sovereignty challenge? Maybe we could start with a short video.
Bon, normalement, il y a une fin.
Well, there was supposed to be an ending to this video, or maybe you can tell us all about it. So how does it end? Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me here today. And I would like to thank the Sésame CEO, Mr. Dubois, and I would like to thank Mr. Braffman for inviting me here today. So as you said, I have quite an unusual background. I was a fighter pilot in a previous life. And I had the privilege to set up the Space Force in 2019. And I worked there until 2022. And so I saw the emergence of this new space era in Europe at the end of the 2010s. And I really saw how this space activity took off. So this is what I describe in the book that you kindly mentioned at the beginning. And I identified all of these challenges that are emerging, that are both threats and threats and risks. So I left Space Force in 2022. So you saw this video, at least the beginning of it, and it's true that it looks like Star Wars. And our mission is to make outer space safer. Sovereignty is a challenge. And I'll come back to that later. But even before we start talking about sovereignty, there's another issue. Space is currently not sustainable at our current in our current use. In 1957, we had our first satellite, Sputnik, that led to 3 debris, 0% of commercial activity in orbit. And the space economy did not exist at the time. Today, in 2024, we've just reached the threshold a few days ago of 10,000 satellites in orbit. 80% of them are for commercial purposes. And these figures are from a recent survey by the the World Economic Forum and McKinsey. And we're talking about $630 billion of economy, both upstream and downstream. By 2030, there will probably be 40,000 satellites. And this generates a lot of debris. Today, there are 36,000 debris that are more than 10 centimeters that fly at a speed of 28,000 kilometers per hour. So that gives you an idea of the energy used. And scientific studies showed that debris of just 3 centimeters now enough to create what we call catastrophic damages on spacecraft. Well, in 2023, a roundtable was organized on this topic, and it's still accessible online to talk about these millions or billions? No, millions of debris. So by 2030, there will be over 40,000 satellites, and the space economy, still according to McKinsey and the World Economic Forum, will be worth even more. And we will reach $1,800 billion by 2050. And we can estimate that there will be 100,000 active satellites in orbit. And as I said, we currently have 10,000 active satellites in orbit. A third of them belong to Elon Musk. And we have a Chinese constellation as well. So, so does it mean that the Space Force General needs to clean up the space? Well, no, this is not what it means. But what's for sure is that these figures show that since the end of the years 2010s, and if you draw a graph with these figures, you can see that we've entered a second space era. And until that new era, we had some stability, some stagnation in terms of number of satellites. And now it's growing at a very rapid pace, exponentially, and it's not going to stop. And the risk of collision increase, as well as space threats. So I talked of threats, and I mean military threats. We need to be very clear about that. So we can have threats from the ground, but also in orbit. There are some satellites that are not there just for civilians, but that can also carry weapons. We can already see dramatic collisions in space and fragments. There are some inert, some idle elements as well. For instance, elements from spacecrafts, from rockets. And this pace, the current space pace is not sustainable. So it's not about knowing whether or not we're going to see more collisions with disastrous consequences. And this was theorized by a Kessler physician. And some of you probably saw the film Gravity with Sandra Bullock and George Clooney with a collision that leads to a cascade of other collisions because of the debris generated. So the space economy will disappear if we reach that Kessler effect, but that will also hinder development for many other activities, including for critical activities, the measurement of rising sea levels, of climate change, to react to the response to natural disasters. All of this will be impacted. And I would like to read the punchline of the study I just mentioned. Space economy is moving from a niche to being omnipresent, and this will be a part of all of global challenges. And this goes to show that this is a very concerning subject, and I'm being told that I need to speed up. It's true that 20 minutes goes by very fast. So what about the current risks? So what are we doing at Lookup? Well, we developed a radar that is based on the ground that can detect all objects that are over a few centimeters. And we're going to deploy them everywhere in the world, including in our overseas territories that we are lucky to have in France. And then we're going to merge all of this data on our digital platform. So that requires a lot of R&D. And this data will be processed, and then we can sell it to commercial, civilian, and defense clients. This can also be sold to insurers. So this information will be used to avoid that kind of disasters. So this information will be useful to avoid collision and also to make sure that the movements made to avoid these collisions will not lead to other collisions. So we need more capabilities. This is what we are developing at Lookup. We are now 30 people in the company. We are developing with a consortium of companies, and we will be operational in summer 2025 in the south of France. And I wanted to show you a live demonstration because a picture speaks 1,000 words, but sadly this was not possible. And our radars are not yet operating, but we can have already some very accurate projections in order to predict the movement of satellites. So we have a search engine in order to use an extensive database for all space objects. So on the screen you can see all of the active satellites. So from there, you can choose, you can pick any object. So when you click like this, you have 2 chances out of 3 to end up on a Starlink object. Just the law of probability. Here you have a screenshot with the rocket, different parts of rockets, and they can weigh between 500 kilos to several tons. Here you have an example with a part of a Russian rocket that has been in orbit since 1973, and that weighs 1.4 tons. This is a picture I just took this morning. And here you can see the calculation, the computation of all of the collision risks for all of the objects in orbit with all of the other objects. It's an all versus all in our algorithm. So we use various criteria to calculate this. And here you can see that it's 1.28 10 minus 24. So here you have 1 chance out of 10,000, sorry, to have a collision, and with a distance of 630 meters. So this is still fairly far away. So here you can see an analysis of the crossing. So here we can see the change, the evolution of the risk over time. And when we click on the maneuver studio, so here we have a maneuver studio. So here we have a chart, so that's more analysis tools. And here you have maneuver suggestions to bring down the collision probability to a level that you will have chosen yourself. So do they have this at NASA? No, but we are not the only ones developing this. It's an emerging market. But for the reasons I just explained, we know that it will grow, maybe not a boom, but it will certainly grow. And we have competitors. We made the right technological choice. And we work with the French Space Agency and their civilian service, the CNES. And we have multi-sensors solutions. And we have this very relevant information. And going back to the sovereignty challenge, our main competitors today are American. So in accessible world, so here I'm not talking about Russia or China, but our main market competitors are American, and they are using the same technology as we are. And the space infrastructure, whether they are commercial, institutional, governmental, or commercial, they cannot rely fully on data and services that are sourced outside of Europe, that we do not have end-to-end control on this. So you are focusing on Europe, absolutely. And in our deck, and I didn't mention it before, but we've raised 10 million euros, and we're just preparing for a second fundraising effort, and we want to be a global leader. And we cannot be only a national or a strictly European player, because it's a global market, it's a global space. And it's not about territorial waters, it's outer space belongs to everyone. And what will be the next step? Well, I think that the next step is the development of our capability providing services. And I think that it will be very important to get all stakeholders involved. And if there is one takeaway here today, is that the insurance world has a role to play. So I think that we need to sit down at the table with policymakers and players, space operators, space launchers, and insurers as well. And companies like my own to deliver that kind of services. And I believe that similar to marine transport or the automotive industry, insurance should be compulsory in the future for space objects as well, to intervene in the event of a collision. Because currently we are navigating blindly in outer space. So we need to improve this. And there's a lack of regulation and legislation. There is a law on space operations that is in the pipelines at a European level that should be passed 2 years from now. And this will apply to the services that we provide, but not only. And very clearly, I think that insurers could have a role to play, at least to steer the content of this law in the right direction. Yes, it's about traffic, similar to road traffic rules and to insurance. And so what would be possible for outer space? Well, this is what is very difficult. As I explained, it's a space that is shared between all countries. There is no territoriality. There's an international treaty, but which has many loopholes. So we need to see how we can navigate this, because you have the Western world as well as China and Russia. So we need to address this in various ways. So companies such as Lookup can play a role on this, because if there's no understanding on regulation mechanisms, maybe we could imagine that platforms such as Lookup could help regulate traffic. When you detect a potential collision between a European satellite and a Chinese satellite, you need to have some sort of coordination, or at least a communication channel that is opened between operators. So you want to be the air control tower for outer space. Yes, maybe that's oversimplistic, but that's the idea. And that's a question that we are currently exploring collectively. It's also about the rules that are going to be for the private sector and the public sector. There's a European consortium that will probably become an EU agency providing free services to space operators. But it remains to be seen what kind of services will be offered and how universal this will be, and what will be the scope of the people who will be able to access these services. So if you are an air operator and you have a free weather forecast service that is on the news, on TV news every night, then it's not going to be enough to fly your planes. You're going to have to pay for these services at the end of the day, and we'll be there for it. So what would be your concluding words if there's only one takeaway? Well, from what I understood in the insurance world, there are many pending questions regarding outer space, and current trends are not necessarily very good. And I think that about 1/3 of satellites are insured currently, and 2/3 are not. So I think that there's a potential to tap into. And I think that that if we make insurance compulsory for satellites, along with services to avoid collisions, this way we could avoid making space unusable anymore, and this would also improve cooperation. Thank you very much, General. A big round of applause. In a few minutes, we're going to